All right, and welcome everyone to the #1 in the 2021 virtual town hall series for the Oakland Greens. This did replace, or it's a way to keep up, as a better way during the pandemic, our free dinner and a movie discussion night series that we've been doing now for 3 years. That is very, very popular. And with all of these events, if you're not already, we hope that you will then expand to being in alternative political parties versus the two-party system. If for nothing else, how has it done for us so far? So how we do this, I will look in the chat. You can raise your hand for Stack. You can put it in the chat as Stack, and I will be keeping track of that. Everyone has 3 minutes to say whatever you want. We just want to keep the topic to something about alternative political parties. And if everyone did get their emails, if not, I can share it for people. Some of the outlines. Also, we do a linguistics town hall. So for this, do we use third parties? Is that type of language a program for us to keep those parties marginalized? So alternative versus third party. If they decide to not impeach Trump and he can run for office again, and he stays a Republican, or decides actually not to be a Republican, builds his own little QAnon party, does that benefit us? But again, anything you want, 3 minutes per. And then when someone does, if they even ask a question, it's open for all of us, right? It really is wanted to be a discussion type of show. That's what we always talk about for the Oakland Greens. And I'm going to shut up now. And if anyone wants to start us out on maybe anything as far as political parties. We have a stat going on. Michael, you got a paper?
I do.
Really? Would you like to start us off?
I could.
Please, thank you.
Well, when I was thinking about tonight's program, I wasn't thinking about the questions on the announcement, but I have a different question that occurred to me, which is there's news that the impeachment of Governor Newsom is actually picking up steam. And if people would remember that when Gray Davis was impeached, the Green Party ran, it's probably its most successful gubernatorial campaign. We ran the late Peter Cameo, and he, for the first time ever, and before or since, he made it into the debates, and was very much a help in party building. And I'm wondering how people would feel about, if in fact Gray Davis isn't Newsom is impeached, how would people feel about running a Green candidate? I'm certainly in favor of it, based on our previous experience. And so I thought we might chat about that. Over.
Any thoughts on that particular one, if there is an impeachment? Really? Don't make me, because I'll step up. We have taken a stance in the Oakland Greens about voting local and green, and that's actually ties into the question that came through the email, is how do we get people to register and then run as a green? I think it's important. The only way, if you looked at the YouTube references, the Green parties around the world that have been successful and are actually running national electorates, are getting elected nationally, like in New Zealand, Australia, parts of England. And they started out the same way, right? They ran like their dog catcher. And not necessarily ran, but the dog catcher happened to be a registered Green Party member and going local. So I think it was, the only thing I would say is that I'm not sure if as a state that we put enough resources behind it, right? I understand that we have to run national candidates too, but I think we put way too much emphasis and money, because we still are trying to navigate a capitalist system. We put way too much money into national campaigns, and we really should focus, because if anything else, there's got to be a more than just one state. Maine is actually really big, actually, in a Green Party. They have a lot of city councils and things like that, members. Here, to have a big state like this, to actually get a Green governor would be incredible. In the chat, are Greens more successful in smaller races than big cities?
Yes,
I heard a yes. Who said yes?
me,
Yeah,
like Blackbrook, one in
oh,
Marin
right.
County.
We had a majority on one of the city councils in Marin.
And one of
And
Arcata.
we had some people in Arcata on the city council of Humboldt, of Eureka.
And
in Arcata.
Greg?
However,
Sorry.
if I may, let me
Yeah,
just say one more thing, and that is, I don't entirely agree. I think the purpose of running candidates is to get the name out. I don't think the purpose of it is winning.
You mean the
And-
name of the party or the name of the
Yeah, the
candidate?
name of the party. Yeah, that's right. I mean, if I think that our problem with candidates on the local level is that we don't use the local campaigns to build the party, which is what I think is the task at hand. Over.
Greg.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of interesting topics that have already been brought up. I'll just touch on a couple of them. First of all, about Peter Cameo's being in the debates. I think it was 2003 when Gray Davis, it was a recall election. And yeah, we got a lot of media, but it didn't really, in my perspective, translate into all that many votes or all that much lasting interest or support for the party. I mean, yeah, we did a little bit better percentage wise, and we got some additional volunteers and interests, but certainly within 4 to 6 years, it pretty much disappeared. So, it would be wonderful to have that again, and it'd be surprising to find a candidate that was as good as Peter, because fortunately Peter had run just the year before, so he was already experienced with the campaign and people knew him. We don't have that situation right now, but in any case, if we were to have essentially the same thing, we'd have to find a way to make use of it. And of course, as people know, since Peter ran for governor, and then we had a couple other campaigns, and then of course, with the presidential really hurt us, people left the Green Party to vote for Obama instead of Hillary Clinton. And then the next year after that, they left to vote for Bernie Sanders. And then of course, this last year, they also again left to vote for Bernie Sanders. So we've been losing some ground, and it kind of brings me to the
Greg,
second point.
can I interrupt you, Greg? I'd really be interested to hear, why do you think that is? I mean, I know they left, but
Yeah.
why do you think that they left the party to do that?
Well, I think it's exactly like one of those videos pointed out, is that people like to have their vote count. It's going to matter for something. And so people thought that, they could vote for Obama instead of Hillary. It would make a difference because they wanted to have the first Black president. They thought that Bernie was a lot more progressive than the other candidates, so they wanted to have it count for something. So they said, instead of voting for a Green that's not going to win, Bernie might not be perfect, but he's a lot better than Biden, a lot better than whoever. So I think that that's one of our problems, is that a lot of the Greens that support all the same values, at the same time they're thinking, well, am I going to waste my vote because Green's not going to be elected, whereas they think that Bernie Sanders has a chance of being elected, so they left, and of course a number of them just haven't gotten back yet. So we still have a number of their names in our database, but it's just, it's more difficult. But I did want to bring back the second point, which is you mentioned about some other countries, and yeah, but of course, almost all those other countries have a very different political system, which again, one of those videos mentioned, the proportional representation system. And so therefore, you know, in some of those countries, Greens get 5, 7, maybe even 9 or 10% of the vote, and they get 5, 7, or 9 or 10% of the seats because it's a proportional system. So you get the proportional representation compared to what your vote is. Whereas in this system, you know, you get 5 or 7 or 9% and you get nothing. You got to get 51%.
Even if you get
So-
49%, you get nothing.
Right. Exactly. If it's a two-way race, yeah, you get 49% and you get nothing. So that's a really big question is, you know, should we put a lot more of our efforts into pushing for a proportional system? And then if we do get it, then we can be like European countries and we'll get 7 or 8 or 9% of the vote and 7 or 8 or 9% of the seats. So I think that's a whole another question that's interesting to talk about.
Okay, I'm good. Does anyone else have thoughts on why they leave the party or even this? And then also in the chat, encourage people to run in state assemblies, like in state assembly 7 races, especially in California. Spend 3,000. I think we can do that too. Any candidate runs, I think we could navigate the capital system without having to raise like huge amounts of money. It's just spending it wisely. But again, back to does anyone have, and I'm asking this because it's also something that's very close to my heart, of why they left the party, whether it be, you know, right, whether they think we can't win or whatever. All right, well, I'm going to go. I'm always going to ask first, but I think it's because we're not fun. And also to those parties that did representational democracy as far as their people, it didn't start out that way. Australia was an extremely, they did the same thing to the Aboriginals that we did to the indigenous people on this continent. The only difference is that they can never get into the center of the country because they don't know how to fucking live there, right? So they've never, like I lived there 94, 96, 97, and they never were able to get an accurate account of how many, which there still are to this day. In the center of Australia, there's people living out there that have lived that way for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, right? So I think it's a matter of how much do we want to fight? And again, I think it's being smarter, not stronger. And again, I think we're not very fun. And also here in California, we're old and we're white, right? We're old and European American. And it just looks like the same old, and again, and add on that we're not very fun, and that we also have not, everything is stacked against us, right? It's like us having a parachute on about trying to run in a windstorm when everybody else is, in a speedboat, things like that. So, oh, and I see James. Yes, please.
I'm gonna. I try to think in a different direction. Try to think sideways on these kinds of things. Maybe that's the wrong question. Is why aren't they coming back? The real question, people switch parties, and the real question is why aren't Greens just attracting people as it is? So if you had a steady attraction, people are going to join the Greens and maybe get frustrated and leave and go back to the Democrats or join Peace and Freedom or something. But what you really need is a steady stream of people that just say, hey, maybe let's go try the Greens. And that's what seems to me it's not worrying about like, oh, some people left and they forgot to come back. What we ought to be thinking about is why we're not having a steady stream of people joining the party, because that's the only thing that's ever going to cause us to grow the way we need to. And so it's trying to find that secret sauce to pull them in ought to be something we spend a lot of time on.
And then Michael?
Well, if I may address your question, I think there's two things that come to my mind. One of them is lesser evilism is a potent force in American politics and has been for at least since the 1930s. And it's particularly potent on the left of all places because of the what was called in the 1930s, the left center coalition was the way for the left to go. And I think it's bullshit. We have nothing to show for that, but it's still a very strong idea. And then the other thing I would point to is we have not found things to do collectively between elections. I think that that's a problem too. And I don't have any great ideas about that, but I think that does, we don't have a reason for people to stay between elections. And I think that hurts us.
Well, I would agree with that too. And, oh, Greg, please, Greg.
Okay, well, I'd like to mention a little bit about some historical examples in terms of trying to answer that question about why we can't grow, why we can't become a major third party or even become the second party. And as far as I can recall, there's 3 quote third parties that were become major forces, and one of them did become the second party. And historically, you have the Free Soil Party, which is an anti-slavery party, like 12 years before the Civil War, and they became a major party, of course, because the issue of slavery was such a hot issue, and the existing 2 parties at the time were the Whigs and the Democrats, and they refused to take a strong stand against slavery. They tried to play both sides of the coin, and when they were in the North, they tried to be a little bit more against slavery, and they were in the South a little bit supportive, but they weren't going to take any strong stand against slavery. So the Free Soil Party came into being after some other smaller parties attempted it, and they became a major party. Of course, they ran a former presidential candidate, former president. They ran a former president when they started out. So they had some major political players. But the bottom line there is that it was such a major issue that it called out for a major change to the political system. And right now, there isn't really the same kind of issue that was impacting back in the mid 1800s the way slavery was. So that was the first example. The second example was the People's Party. It's the Populists, and that was in the later 1800s, and that was largely a regional situation where you had the farm states, and the farm states were being squeezed out by the bankers. The bankers, would put up the money so that they could buy seed, and they just squeezed the farmers. And so the farmers rebelled against the 2-party system because neither party served their interests, and they started their own party, and they swept the power in those farm states. They took over the governorship, they took over the state legislatures, they elected congressmen. I forget how many, but there was at least 4 or 5, maybe 6 farm states that had populist legislatures and representatives. They didn't do all that well, though, in other places. They tried to make some alliances with some southern states, and they just couldn't make any alliances in the cities in the eastern states. But for a while there, they were very strong in the farm states until they ran their own candidate for president. And then after that, they compromised and supported a Democrat, and that was their downfall because they got sucked up in the major party, the Democratic Party.
On Jim Crow.
And so I'm going to interrupt you, Greg. I'm going to interrupt you there, Greg, but if you can hold that. And I want to first ask anyone else that has not gone yet. I mean, you're fine to listen to anyone, but if you have any thoughts, if not, I am about to go to Jen. No one? Okay. James,
well,
please.
Let me just finish this up, though, if no one else has it.
When someone else does have their hand up, can you come back after another 3 minutes?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. James.
I didn't want to interrupt Greg if you wanted to just finish. You're close to being done, Greg?
I'll finish up on the populists.
Okay. Thank good, Greg. Thanks, James.
Okay, so to finish up on the populists, so they lasted until they made compromises with the Democrats on because they supported the Democratic presidential candidate, and it burned out the party. So that is another issue. You know, maybe there is in some parts of the country a kind of a regional situation like the populists had, where we can build a lot of strength on a couple of issues and learn the lesson that the populists learned the hard way. You don't make compromises and go and throw in your lot with Democrats or any other major party. So that was a lesson of the populists. And then the final example, which I won't elaborate on, is the Socialist Party. And the Socialist Party did really well at the local level, but wasn't able to really make headway at the national level. And we can talk about the Socialist Party and examples, things to learn from that. So I think it's useful to look at history and see how different third parties in the United States are able to make headway or not. But again, it seems that if we can get proportional representation, we should be able to be in the national and state legislatures just the same way the Europeans are. Whereas the two-party system, it's really all or nothing. You're going to be one of the two major parties or you're not, because that's what happened to these third parties after 10, 15, 20 years. They basically disappeared. Okay. I think James is on.
Nope. Should I go ahead now?
Yes, please.
Oh.
And I see Dale.
What I was going to say is, we talk about, like, how can this third party break in? But in fact, we live in a one-party state right now, and it's the business party. And both wings of the business party have the same policy for the most part. But there's Matt Taibbi was correct when he described this whole thing. It's choreographed pro wrestling is what this is. And the policies and the actions really don't change. If you look at our policies on internet, or we have wars and coups and who we say, it's pretty much the same. If you look at the whole military industrial complex, the way it's controlled, it's pretty much the same no matter which party is in power. Nothing really much changes, except in the public's mind, there's kind of this idea that there really are two different parties. And there's a tremendous amount of media, of corporate media, that's constantly jamming on this and just trying to say these guys are different, and there'll be some, fringe issues that they're going to be different on, or some crazy people within each group, but pretty much down the line, they represent the same thing, and they can all point fingers at the other guy as being responsible, but they play these roles. And I think that that's what we have to get across, is that we live in a one-party state. And if you really want to have some kind of a two-party system, it's not one of those parties. And, and even just the idea that you're going to transform one of those parties away from that direction, they're so controlled by corporate money, that's just never going to happen. And that's something I think where we ought to be going after is this kind of unconscious belief by people that we live in a two-party state, and whatever we develop, I think, has to be to go after that.
Well, thank you. And I have Dale, then Alice, then Baba, and then I'm going to call him myself. Dale Baum, please. Let's hear your voice, sir.
Well, I had a follow-up question for Greg. You mentioned three very powerful third parties winding up with the Socialist Party. But what about the Know Nothing Party? 1854, it took control of the United States Congress. And again, like anti-slavery, it had a powerful anti-message, again, being anti-immigrant, anti-Catholic, nativist focus to it. So is the key to success for a third party to really have some kind of enemy out there that's clearly defined, like the refinery in Richmond or something can make for a Richmond Progressive Party, something like that. That's for you, Greg.
Oops, sorry. I'll hold you to really hold you to time, but Greg, if you want a direct response, please do.
Okay. Well, that's a really good point. I didn't include the Know Nothing Party because I think it was only that level for the one presidential election. I don't think it lasted more than one presidential election. But in any case, no, I think you have a good point. And not just in the 19th century, but I think, 20th century as well as now, a lot of parties are able to get ground if they define enemies. I mean, we could try it out with what James is talking about, and we could, target corporations, target big money. We just haven't gone like that single kind of focus, but we could, sure.
Thanks. Alice.
So going back to the point about we don't have two parties, we really have one party. One thing we don't really have is labor representation. All the labor representation has been watered down by the Democrat Party. And now the last AIFCO, or the last union meeting I was, where we were voting on what, I know I'm not in your state, but we were voting on who we were going to recommend. It almost in every case, they were like, well, how much money do they have to spend? And they decided who they were going to endorse based on how much money they had, and when there were more than one Democrat or when there were some independents. Nobody really represents labor in our country anymore. It's like two forms of corporate power. And I think the Green Party, I think we need to offer people something that we're for, not something that we're against, like just railing against the corporations. We should be for the worker. We should be for, sustainable future for everybody, and an inclusive, sustainable future. So I think to represent ourselves as Greens in a positive light, we have to say that we are for regular people. We're for essential workers. We're for the infrastructure that really runs the country, that, that if all disappeared tomorrow, it would be like that movie 3 Days Without a Mexican, like the 1% wouldn't know what to do with themselves. So yeah, that's what I have to say.
And we have Baba next, but of course, welcome to live actual theater, even though it's virtual. And Justin brought this up too. Part of the disclaimer that all of the things we talk about here will be used outlines to actually put together legislation. We have the Oakland Greens has through the virtual town halls this year, we're using all of the content to put together platforms and have a actual legislative writing project going on, so that it's only 3 people and only 2 of them probably have any. I'm not a writer. I can talk. I don't know what the fuck. Anyway, but so that by the end, or at least halfway through the virtual town hall, we will have some things concrete, which may be around legislation bill to campaign around for drafts and things like that. So again, that was part of the disclaimer. Baba, you are next, please.
Well, actually, I was going to say something similar to what Alice said. It's good to see you again, Alice. I used to live in Seattle. We have to be for working class. We have to be for a clean environment. To me, I think that's kind of obvious that we're for that. We have to put that in the same frame as we are what we're against. We're anti-capitalist because we're for working people. We're against climate change and the fossil fuel companies. We're for a clean environment. And that means there's plenty of work to do between elections. If you meet people's more immediate needs in between elections, people will remember that. If they were at your soup kitchen or they got help with their housing issues, or you help them get a program together to clean up the waste in their neighborhood. Those will be things that they'll remember when election time comes around. And so we need to work more on the communities. And there's going to be a lot of failure from these two capitalist parties. I mean, right now, you know, we're already seeing failure in terms of the $2,000 checks, for instance, right? I mean, anybody got their check? So, you know, if we help people with their more immediate issues and still have a very consistent message about what we're for and against, I think that will make a big difference going forward, particularly since we're coming against the 2030 deadlines regarding climate change.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. And I was picking myself next, and I have an actual ask at the end. But going from the chat, yeah, Greg, so the idea is to put together things and then go to candidates that we like. I know that at least from, since I am the one who runs our social media, I have taken a solution-minded only approach. I don't need to hear about the problems anymore. I don't need to hear about, oh, police. I know that. Without even having to watch the news, I know that some high school, maybe educated European American man who has some other issues, might even be an actual Nazi, has killed another unarmed person of color or someone in a marginalized poor community. I don't need to see any news report to know that that happened today, happened a couple times today, right? So so yeah, so the idea, but then that makes us look, if I can go to a candidate, which I have already, we've actually reached out to people, not as successfully, and also will admittedly, no, I won't. And so, but to have that, and have that as a way to go, look, right, we're over here doing shit, right? It ain't no, we ain't talking about it, we're being about it. We're not here talking, again, trying to be an NGO, raising money. That's another one that can go to any money that the Oakland Greens raise doesn't go to any individual person. At the most, what we're trying to do this year is upgrade our graphics computer, right? But other than that, everything goes to finding solution-minded people. All of these discussions, everything goes that way. So then I want to go one more from to pushing issues and viewpoints. You know, I do that social media-wise. Again, I can only speak for myself. I don't know what other counties are doing and things like that, but I agree we should. We do in Oakland. We are always trying to, granted that at least the discussion goes a long way between people. There is only a few of us actually that are in charge of the social media, things like that too. Actually, we're at a point now where we're growing enough where we could do an assistant. It's not a paid position, or even, so what I'm not against, jobs for people either. Anyway, so let me stop there, but I just want to ask a question, another, for solutions. Does saying third party, is that programming us negatively to say that we can't win versus alternative parties? Because, right, everyone knows there's actually three other, well, I guess only two other, because I guess Peace and Freedom is only California. California is a big state, 6th largest economy in the world. You made it onto the state that counts. So there's three other political parties that are, the Constitution Party is pretty big, of course, Libertarians, Greens, which we, even though we were knocked off of a lot of states in this last election, we actually were on 47. So my question, that's what I'm saying, or say second party, counting them all down, should there be ranks? That's my question. So again, this ties into the linguistic town hall too, with non-gender pronouns and shit like that. Is saying third party impacting us negatively? Bueller, in a way. But I do agree with you, Jay, definitely, that the only difference between the two parties, Democrats realize if you gave the middle class a little bit more money, let them earn a little bit more, they'll shut up and let you do whatever you want to the fucking poor, right? And I was just as guilty of that for a long, long time. I was much younger then, but as not Abby, but his partner Hoffman said too, you know, when the political becomes personal, right? And once your eyes are open, I had this talk, Barnard, once you take the pill, can't fucking close your eyes, right? Once you know that there are those Nazis actually out there, once you see that, you can't fucking hide it. I don't know why. I'm fathomed to my core of why the American people haven't just gone, what the fuck? Just fucking went crazy. Or even why that doesn't push them out of the two parties, because it's obvious when all of the corporations put their money in both, and what it took in actual, again, Nazis, white nationalists, all the other ills, racism, sexism, homophobia, patriarchy, actually went in there, and if they would have found someone, they probably would have killed them. Nobody freaked out. I don't know. So anyway, I'm back to that question again of, I personally use alternative parties, and you may see that in the all of the content that we put on social media and things like that, but I don't know. I don't claim to know.
I really prefer the term alternative party. I think to what Greg was saying about people really want their vote to count. It's a really simple way to say we're offering an alternative, not we're third, we won't really count because we all know there's only two or one possible winner. It's changing the mindset.
And in the chat, you see too, and it's true. And it's funny because, you know, African and the colonized people have been saying it all the time, James, that the Nazis, in fact, they've always been here. They just were in the closet for a really, really long time. They were out of the closet for a long time, and then they were in the closet. And a lot of it is even subtle shit too, that even in progressive places, I say that about us in the state Green Party. We still have a lot of internal prejudice going on. I don't say racist because I don't think they're able or even have the power to control the economic situation of anyone else, but we still have a long way to go internally about how we speak to one another, who are we willing to actually back, what does it actually say? Again, do we think that it was a negative impact going from Cynthia to Jill to Howie, right? I personally think it is. And again, I don't actually come this from myself. This is from what I'm talking, people talk to me on social media, other countries. Again, I had said it before and blessed, Oakland Greens are growing. You know, having 11 people may not seem a lot to you, but when it's usually just 4 people of the two, you know, it's really good that it's people want to get involved and there's more involvement. Well, I get this off of having interactions with other African diaspora people around the country and around the globe, through social media, of course, and say the same thing, right? That it really, that anytime that some of the, when we ran with Cynthia and some of the hip hop groups and hip hop activists that registered green, when a lot of these people weren't politically active ever, right? And then to go to, you know, they left. They're like, oh, you're really not down. So, oh, Alice.
So going back to what Marina was saying about alternative party, I agree with that terminology, but I feel like we need to build third-party solidarity. So how do we say alternative party solidarity? Or, you know, like that's, I'm trying to wrap my mind around that, because you know what everybody means when they say third-party solidarity. And then, I'm sorry, this is like taking it off topic again, but getting like the 14 to 18-year-old set that is going to be the voters next time around, you know, like how do we swoop in on the Sunrise Movement when they have all those fun activities? So I do think we do need to make it more fun, and we need to do things that are like more cooperative and art builds. And I'm bringing an idea to you guys today. This is off topic, but I was talking to Nathalie at in the Portland Green Party, and we're talking about maybe doing some kind of online thing with the left coast cities of Seattle, Portland and Oakland, possibly, if you guys are up for that, because it would show like a united front and that Greens are out here. And I really think a lot of people just don't know Greens exist, that they're actually like a force, and we do sort of need to look more vibrant than we do. And we do have a lot of people that like kind of revolving door on their way to socialist alternative or on their way to, you know, Bernie or somebody else. Okay, that's all.
We got, well, I think, oh, James, yes, please.
I'm gonna take a little different look at this. And so I've been trying to, of late, I've been reading some books from the 60s and 70s about ideas about change and social change and so on. And I've been trying to think of just looking at the fundamentals. What is needed to create political change, and try to come up with a list, a recipe or something, you know, or at least kind of ideas. And so some examples of what it has to do. It has to be self-replicating, because if it's not self-replicating, if these ideas don't get passed on and passed on and passed on, then you're not going to go anywhere. And that's kind of what, you know, in terms of conservative thinking, that's what families do. Families indoctrinate their kids in religion or in politics or whatever, and that's how it self-replicates. And so these ideas have to have some kind of ability to replicate, otherwise they're not going to go anywhere. And it also has to be consciousness changing. So it has to change the way, you know, and so in our case, what we want to change is change people away from consumerism. So consumerism, you know, how we're indoctrinated to be consumers, and that we have to sell ourselves in our job, and all these kind of things are part of the reason that we fit into the capitalist system, and we're not going to change it. And so how do we, you know, so it has somehow be conscious, you know, and because we're poor, because we're the Green Party, it's got to be a low cost. And it's got to satisfy emotional needs. It can't just be something at some intellectual level. It really has to grab people emotionally, so that they have a desire to keep it, you know, to keep it going, you know, that so it fills the void of alienation that capitalism creates. And, you know, so those are just kind of like some little ideas, but it seems like that would be part of this process. What we want to do is we want to start building up kind of a deep understanding of what needs to happen into people, and then see if we can figure out a mechanism to try to make it happen, so that somebody, you know, once you have these conversations with somebody, you know, they come away going, God, maybe I really should become a Green. And, you know, there's some real reasons to do it, you know, because generally, you know, we deal with negative reasons, you know, but they're not really, you know, we want to make as create as positive reasons why we want to be a person wants to be a Green. And anyway, those are just some thoughts.
Well, I can tell you from experience that for us in the Oakland Greens, that we have done well, excuse me, navigating that capitalist system as far as fundraising, and without raising tons and tons of money, but not raising enough to be sustainable. So I think, and that goes back to the events that are fun. One of them being the whole thing that we're doing here. It isn't, I mean, I produce it, but it isn't our idea. Like, this comes from people talking and saying this is what we would like, right? Everybody likes to talk, right? How did this spawn out of it? Anytime you go to a meeting and it's question and answer time, and the person gets up to mic to ask a question, and not really a question, you know, because people want to be heard, right? We do come from an ego, and we've been taught to be, like you said, not being, we've been programmed. The brain ain't nothing but a computer, and it goes that way. I don't know if I like so much even wanting to use any sort of the same systems, especially like you were saying too, how religion indoctrinates people. I don't want to indoctrinate anything. I want people to be educated, and then on their own make decisions to be good citizens in their community on their own. Not because the law says so, not because God says so, but because they just have self-esteem enough that they just want to be a good person. And we can educate that way too. I want a completely new system, not even starting. Actually, I've also haven't put it into text yet, but I think that we should be treating America as if we're coming out of apartheid. And we need a whole new constitution. Why the fuck am I still basing how anything can have any basis when all of those motherfuckers had slaves? Like, you want me, you wouldn't trust a slave owner now. Why would we do something from 200 that has no idea of the jumps in technology, again, the fascists, just everything. They had no idea. We need a complete clean slate and focus, and then you put your money towards that. We have the wealth. And then the other joke to me always is too, is that I think it's about control. It's not about, you wanting that it's even more than not just classism. It's about control. Because you cannot tell me that even if you went globally and we had a global standard of living, that any of the 1% that their lifestyle would change whatsoever. If we taxed Amazon more to cover whatever, I just don't see it happening. I don't think that they would miss a fucking private plane. I don't think they'd miss one. So then what's really going on, right? So this isn't about the fact of like redistribution of wealth. This is like, you just want to be either better. Again, now we're going back to ego, right? Because all those motherfuckers are just the same little boys like Trump, right? Fucking 14-year-old boys have never been told no. And it's just too much, right? So I think that there's things out there, James, that are already being done and that you can navigate, again, by having events. And also the other thing that we found is having an ask. Saying, hi, so we do 2 emails a month, all about events, except for November and December when we don't have any virtual events, but we still, at least one, goes out, which is actual fundraising, which this time happened to be like, we want a new computer, right? We are growing, we want to do better videos and put together better content and things, and trying to navigate the social media algorithms to build the party, right? That works. When we're saying, hey, we never do anyone lack of funds, but anything you donate, this is what it's going to go to. Whether it be a presenter, where we had Rosa Clemente, or what we're working on this one with Aya De Leon, which is a verbal commitment. So I think it's out there, and what it is you just have someone who has the energy to do it, right? I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do once we do get back to work. Indoctrinate your kids to wipe their butts. Yes. Yes, my mama taught me right. So again, I didn't hear a lot on that one, so I don't know other solution-minded ideas. I encourage everyone to, if you know anyone, ask them. I love Mickey. I wish Mickey Huff would run for fucking office, right? Oh, man, don't even, I think that's another thing that hurts us. Back like even way back said Amy Goodman, there's a lot of people making a lot of money off of being activists and being progressive, right? But never ever call and support a general strike, right? Never ever ever don't let green candidates on. How much love do we get from even just staying locally? How much love do we get from KPFA? I haven't checked the recent part of the debate, but our recent school board new members turning out to be not progressive as much. And they were talking about the stipend, and where I do believe that political position should be a job, and you should be able to, could still be a stipend, but something that you can live on, have a shelter and your bills paid, and internet and food in your refrigerator. You don't need to, buy a Lamborghini. But in doing that, again, you'd have to ask more money, but they're saying, oh, well, you can't do that. And I'm like, well, you could, if again, you elect people before profit candidates that'll put legislation into power, but that's not what happens, right? Still just don't go into it. So those are some of my other thoughts. Nothing else? Nobody has ideas? Nothing. Greg, yes, please, sir.
Okay. I was just thinking that if we pay close attention to what is happening with various issues, both the national level and state level, it's going to be a guarantee, I think, that Biden is not going to satisfy a number of progressives on a number of issues. Already some of his cabinet appointments show the direction he's heading in. And over the coming 2, 3, 4 months, I think it's to be real clear that he's going to disappoint a lot of progressive people. And therefore, if we're ready for that, we can make a lot of hay, hopefully catch a number of progressives on these issues that they really care about. You can kind of imagine whatever your favorite progressive issues are, some of the things that he's going to disappoint on. And I think we can do the same thing with Gavin Newsom. Now, I don't know what the timeline would be for this recall election. I suspect that the earliest would be, the fall of this year. I guess, of course, it's just be for the governor candidate, but maybe it would carry over until next year if he survives the recall. In any case, we can keep our eyes and ears out for state issues, especially if he survives. We can use it to run against him, as well as all the statewide offices, as well as all the state legislature offices, for any issues that the Democrats are weak on. So I think that's one thing that we can think about is keep track of issues and be ready to move on them and publicize them. We're the party that's in solidarity with the people on these issues, and not these sellout Democrats, blah, 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 blah.
Right. Maybe another ask, if I could see a bit, like I see people talk about Mickey Huff, and I am really disappointed at the so-called progressive media. How can we hold them not even accountable, but let on green candidates? I really do think that if Davey D decided that he was going to actually give equal time to green candidate and himself, I bet you that candidate would get elected. Because then people would feel the same thing, like, oh, well, maybe they can win, because now these media organizations are paying attention. We're always fighting that battle. But how, because just telling them that they don't do it didn't work and has not worked. No? Would it be taking away KPFA memberships? Right? Having if the county green decided, if Alameda County decided to put out a campaign of mail to say, hey, we want to show KPFA how many of their donors are green, and we want all of our green members to pull their memberships to KPFA, or a signature campaign. Maybe both, signature first and going, look, if you don't, here's how many people are ready to actually direct action protest and take their donations away. No? Nobody?
I'm hesitant to comment on KPFA because I've been immersed in that now for 2 years. But let me just say that the complexities of the relationships, and the behaviors within that dysfunctional organism are hard to, I'd take a whole hour to just explain them. So I don't want to really go there, but I would say that KPFA has really been taken in a direction that's very middle of the road. They're taken in the direction toward NPR. At least the management wants to do that, and the primary faction in the local station board wants to do that. And the idea that within that faction, the idea that that they really care about listener membership is actually probably not there. I think the idea with that faction is to take it to a direction where big donors are the main people that are going to support it, and you know, and big Democratic Party donors, and it's going to become just another mouthpiece, you know, for a faction of the local Democratic
You
Party.
say become? You mean it's not
Yeah.
already?
It's not completely, because they haven't gotten rid of Mickey Huff yet, and they haven't gotten rid of a few other voices, but they, you know, they've gotten rid of some, and Guns and Butter is gone, and a couple others, but they want to turn it into a more of a corporate radio station,
Right.
you know. So it not necessarily taking corporate money, but operating like a normal corporation.
Right.
Top-down management. So they want to make it very, very anti-democratic, and so it's a sad situation, but that's just the way it is.
Right. And full disclosure, I get all of emails from both sides, and because we have a Green Party member on it now, I'm going to those meetings. It's always been kind of central, and we're kind of back to ego in that, and money, again, because people are making a lot of money off of being activists. I've had a joke for a long, long time that if they ever do free Mamiya, there's gonna be a lot of t-shirt companies going out of business. And so, but yeah, so I'm in that too, and it is sad, which I disagree. And it's not just the news programs, it's the music too. Sideshow Radio isn't on anymore. It's a whole bunch of shit going on over there that, you know, it seems like, oh, and then you don't really like, yeah, anyway. But that's neither here nor there, which still goes to show maybe it is important. You know, I will bring it up at the next Oakland Greens meeting, right? Because no matter what the county does, luckily we're a club and we do whatever the hell we want. And it's not whatever the hell we want, but we still vote. But I could see that being, you know, something that I would be down for completely, again, because they are about trying to build it for corporate donors. So if you pull that rug out of money before they are able to get all those big donors, you know, maybe they'll, you know, straighten up and fly right. Call me from Philly. I'm a big fan of like more like in your face, fuck you, right? You know, you're like, I mean, if all the tent cities and the shit doesn't make you fucking curse, then I don't know, man. I have no idea. You know, maybe you're like an amoral D&D character or something, because I don't know how you could not just be like, what, huh? I don't, yeah, that's just me. So anyone have any other ideas, thoughts? Are we wrapping? Oh, Greg, yes, please.
Well, I was just wondering whether we want to spend a little more time on one or more of the different topics we brought up. I mean, we've brought up probably a half a dozen different things. There's about the, you know, the name. Should we talk about the alternative party or the solidarity party or whatever name we want to use? Then there's issues, you know, various issues that we think can help build the party. And then there's the political system itself, the two-party system versus the proportional system. Is that something worth discussing more, and how we can tackle that? So I'm just wondering whether it's possible to kind of do some little survey of some kind and see if people want to pursue one or more of these topics in a little more depth, because we kind of touched the surface on a bunch of them, but there's still lots more to explore, I think, on many of them.
Always deep dive. Yeah, of course. Does anyone have a preference first? Greg, do you have a preference? What would you deep dive more
I'm
into?
fine with any of these. It's just, I think, you know, and unfortunately, I don't know exactly how you do it, but, you know, some people are always a little less outspoken, and you know, I don't know if they can type in the chat or how, or just give a one word response about a topic that you might be interested in or something, just so we can see what people are interested in.
Well, my first one that I think is something that's just actually doable in the community scheme of things is the name, which also can be business party, changing, as opposed to Republicrats, whatever, and whether or not alternative versus third would be my thought. But don't listen to me, because when I actually brought it up as a question, no one had any thoughts to go into that deep stuff or deep down that rabbit hole. Rephrased, my apologies. But rabbit holes of issues. Do we focus more on trying to grab onto an issue in our states and local communities and making sure to put that on all of our social media and talking to people in the grocery stores, emailing our friends, relatives, email lists, and such like that? You can go down that rabbit hole. Oh, Baba, yes, please.
I've already said what I wanted to say about the things we could do in between elections. I think there's plenty of stuff, particularly around the environment, Black Lives Matter, housing issues. But the thing I want to focus on is how we characterize the larger parties. And I think we need to use language that shows that we understand there's a difference between the two of them, but that they're both not different enough. And I think calling them both the capitalist parties or the business parties or something like that, where you can say, well, one has got more neo-Nazi than the other, but they're both business parties. So we have to allow people to realize, okay, they're different, but not enough to change the fundamental problems in my life.
Okay, well, there's one vote there. Alice. Oh, gotta unmute.
All right, I was agreeing with something that Kofi said, and also somebody earlier was talking about calling them the dinosaur parties, but just reframing that they are not representative of, the mass of people. But I think we do still have to make some distinction. It was very disappointing to me to learn that Australian Greens came over here and supported Bernie, and that was kind of disappointing. Like, we don't have our stuff together enough that we're worth supporting by other global Greens. And I think really networking all the Greens everywhere and just like showing that there are more of us. I think in California, you guys have the option of registering Green. We don't have that. We have to go for ballot access every time, unless we somehow make the magic 5%. But a lot of people never heard of us, or, and I think identity politics, whatever, having some kind of identity, like putting the Green identity out there is really important. Differentiating ourselves from the other parties. And then I just put on the chat, I don't even know if this is going to show up, but it's something that I screenshotted from the discussion on eco-socialism that shows kind of like tangible things that people can do and get engaged with, which I think if we're tangibly in the communities, then people will see that Greens exist and that we're functional members of society, and we're really like, we are the real grassroots. All right, that's all, my 3 minutes.
I am completely dysfunctional. Thank you very much. Well, that was two that just wanted to deep dive into how we all would describe the two-party system. If I don't hear anything else, I think that's it. I mean, oh, James, yes, please.
I'm trying not to speak a lot, but I'm speaking more than I wanted to. I wanted to hear more people. But I'm gonna, when I think about the last 5 years, it seemed to me that as we were going out of the end of the Obama administration, it was pretty clear that he hadn't solved the crises that began in 2008, and it was just kind of sputtering along. And I've often wondered, how Trump could have got in there, because in my opinion, he was allowed to be their candidate in some way, because it wasn't just that, the other people just floundered. There was no effort like there was in the Democratic Party this last year to, we might end up with Bernie if we don't step in, and they just came in and shoved Biden through. The Republicans probably could have done that in 2016 and didn't. And I kind of wonder about that, if they were worried about the problems that were coming down the line, and they figured they needed a strong man in there who would not be afraid of just sending in troops and shooting people or doing all the other kinds of, bloody things that Trump would have done, but in the end turned out to not be necessary, because his tax cuts and stuff just kept the whole system limping along for another 4 years until COVID hit. And then COVID kind of, absolved Wall Street of the, next downturn, because now it can all be blamed on COVID. And so for this last election, they just thought, well, we don't have to worry about having a strong man when we bail out Wall Street. We already have the reason to bail out Wall Street. Nobody will be paying attention because we're going to just blame it all on COVID. So we can put Biden back in there, and he's easier to control. And I wonder if anybody else kind of thinks that way, like that this is it's not, just some kind of random thing. There's a lot of corporations behind this whole system that are just deciding, who they want in there and who they can control. And even when Trump was in there, he mostly was controlled. They controlled him through the whole Russiagate scenario and got him to do what they wanted. So anyway, that coming collapse is happening now, and it's going to create a lot of tension within the middle class and the poor in this country. And it seems like what we ought to also be thinking about is how to take advantage of this. This is, we got, at least 4 crises coming, the economic crisis, COVID crisis, the climate crisis, and a crisis of democracy. And people just are stopping to believe in the government. So all of these things, it seems like, provide an opportunity for us to recruit people, and we ought to be thinking in those terms.
On another point to take it to changing how we would refer to the two-party system, because we don't need separation of church and state so much anymore as corporation and state. There's kind of a revolving door of working, like, how the hell do you work for the head of Pfizer and then go work for the FDA? That makes no, I mean, we know why, because it's that corrupt system. So using it that way. But I'm sorry, I have this burning desire, because it came up again finally, and I had mentioned, do people think that if Trump forms his own party, that would help alternative parties like the Green Party? Dale.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is a possibility where you get to use the historical example Greg was talking about, when all of a sudden you had the Whig Party just get split between the pro-slavery cotton Whigs and the anti-slavery Northern conscience Whigs, the Whigs who had a conscience. That was the beginning of the end of the Whig Party. So we could be witnessing the beginning of the end of this Republican party. Certainly not from the third party system, but from the decay of the fifth party system. The Republican Party has been transmogrified into a kind of a violent white nationalist party now. And that's a big distinction, really, between the Biden and the current Democratic Party. So yes, absolutely. In fact, our fate may be controlled by the larger political context of a big, huge split in the Republican Party. You don't have to have a 50-50 split. You just take away something like 25% of them who are going to just remain a Republican Party, whereas Trump will form his own, what he said, didn't he mention a Patriot Party or something like that?
Nazi Party, Patriot, yeah, something like that. One of those two. Well, I guess the question would be then to turn that, when we're talking to people and trying to get them to register green, going, look what's happening in this two-party system. Now we're going to have an alternative if he can get enough, because that's it too. 73 million people voted for him, right? Not all of them were Nazis, but a lot of them said that type of racism, sexism, homophobia, patriarchy, misogyny is okay with them. But you can imagine that all those people at Capitol, what was that, 10,000? That's quite a bit of actual fucking, go back to slavery, put them in the ovens, kill, that's and living here. And they, like James said at the beginning, they've always been here, right? They've always been here. So I don't know. Oh, and we're back to James again, please. Yes, please.
I just want to, what Dale said, it's kind of like what's you read about in the news nowadays, that he's going to go form this other party. And I'm not sure I buy into any of that, but I'm kind of surprised at how quickly those kind of narratives change. As I recall, during the 2016 election, when it seemed to be that Clinton was going to win, and there was all this talk going on about how Trump was destroying the Republican Party and they would never come back, and it would this was going to be a huge blow. The Democrats were going to stay in control forever, and then all of a sudden he wins, and that whole narrative just completely went away. And in fact, the Republicans have stayed strong under that, under that 4 years where, if anything, they seem to be, they did better in this last election than they did in 2016, and not that they are recruiting a lot more people. They're just a lot sneakier and trickier and know how to ruin, wreck the system so that they can win, disenfranchise voters and do all these other things. And the Democrats are pretty much pretty incompetent, except in controlling their primaries, so that they make sure that the corporate candidates win there. But these things can change really, really fast. I don't, I think we wait 6 months before we think, whether he's going to be able to do anything. I suspect not, especially after the January 6th event. It's hard to imagine that he could really split the Republican Party, but who knows?
Right. And then another one that's coming through is about mutual aid, which I think also ties into demilitarizing the police, which also turns back to how we say things. I don't like defund the police. I like demilitarize the police. And we are coming up to the end, but I want to say that, so what we've come out of this is that to, I guess, mutual aid networks reach out to other Green parties around the state, was put forth to trying to find candidate to run for governor, if this recall does go through, or even I would expand to say even in the next gubernatorial election for California, if we can actually find someone and have the energy to put behind them, actually looking at you, Justin, and actually get them elected, I think that would be great. I actually think it'd be more doable to focus on the school board and city council, and even more doable to just, even for non, Parks and Rec, it's somebody up there who happens to be registered green, which again expands on registering green. And I think the other one would be, again, it goes back to how do we build the party. So those are the solutions that I've heard that kind of would be doable. I mean, of course, I'll have this up online for people to peruse again, and there'll be memes and edits and fun things like that about it. And does anyone else have any closing remarks? And all I can say, oh yes, Greg, please.
Yeah, one thing I just remembered is that I was on another Zoom call about, it was really, I guess it was right at the beginning of the year. And someone mentioned that there's a bill being introduced in the California legislature for public campaign financing. Because that's, as was mentioned, was one thing that really holds the Greens back, is we don't have anywhere near the money, especially for state level, let alone national level races. And if we can have public campaign financing, that would be a big breakthrough for us. So we should pay attention to that and try to get help to get that done.
All right, I like that. So those ones that I mentioned will be coming up at our Oakland Greens meeting. I'm sure that we'll have no problem passing it. It just means about getting the text and stuff together and pushing it out on social media, which again, in pandemic, that's all that I'm doing. I encourage you to look at the rest of our series. Next month, we're going to be talking about white supremacy and Christianity. You know, this particular 2021, I don't know, I mean, it was planned during the pandemic, but for sure, this season has a lot of provocative topics in it. It's probably going to be one of our most unique seasons. So please spread the word, share our social media when you see it. Again, and check us out. We have our monthly general meeting the third Sunday of every month for the Oakland Greens, where we actually, again, talk about how we actually put this into practice. Sometimes we're actually work on documents together. It actually is a lot of, so again, we're just focusing on being solution-minded, not just bitching about what's going on. So I want to thank everyone for coming, and thank you very, very much for your participation and all of the information that you shared. And we'll see you next month. Be well, everybody.